If you're in tech sales in Singapore, chances are you will be following him on LinkedIn. So, what's his story? Well, he started his career as a fitness trainer, yes. And then he made a big move with the world of talent acquisition, rising up through the ranks. Today, we will explore the lessons he has learned along the way through this career reset of his and some insider insights from the world of recruitment that he hopefully shares with us. So let's jump straight into this conversation. Welcome, madam.
Thank you. I mean, famous or infamous? I don't know. It depends who you ask.
All right. So we'll begin with, and we go a little bit into your past. So where did you grow up? And can you share a little bit about your journey into the world of fitness? What drew you towards that path?
So, I grew up in a small town called Coventry, which is basically famous for not an awful lot. In fact, there's an insult in England. If you've been sent to Coventry, it means you've been ignored. So it's a town that basically is known for an insult. So not an awful lot to do there. I wasn't really too worldly in a way. I worked at the local newspaper there. I worked in the local nightclub. I worked in the local radio station for a while. I pretty much did everything. Did the whole year backpacking things, lived in Australia for a year and did all of the Asia experience as well. And I would say come back and change, man. My eyes were open that there's more to life than jumping jacks on a Saturday night and just, going for a takeaway curry. There was more to life than that. So my eyes had been open. So going back to small town Coventry was difficult for me. I realized I needed to do something different and get out. And at this stage, my friends had all been to university. They knew the career they were going to go into, where I was very much just about doing whatever was fun at the time. So before I even went into fitness, I did a variety of roles, from nightclub promotion, failed actor. Let's be clear, failed actor. The biggest thing I ever did, I was an extra in an Adidas commercial. If you pause it just at the right second, you may just about know that it's me. And yeah, and then there was a kids' TV show where I was known as Confused Jogger number 3. So I wasn't exactly Leonardo DiCaprio. So I figured I probably needed something a little bit more substantial. So I lived in London for some years after I came back from traveling. Generally, once you've had your eyes open of seeing the rest of the world, going back to small town UK is quite difficult. Moved to London. London was fun, but London is also very expensive, right? And you need to earn some cash. And this around this time, I decided I'd get into the world of personal training, because I thought, well, what do I like? I like people, and I like exercise. No brainer, right? So, I figured it out, became a personal trainer in London, and it was fascinating for a bit. But I'm working with people that are true athletes. I mean, unbelievable specimens of human beings that a Greek god and I would look at them, and I was very much sort of the average Joe in terms of how I looked.
You're not.
The way that I made money quite quickly, I was like, okay, I'm going to be the voice, the average person, right? Because people would come in and go, I want to look like that guy. I'm like, well, if you want to look like that guy probably hasn't slept. He can only sleep for 4 hours in one go. He hasn't eaten a carbohydrate in years. He can't have any alcohol. There's a large part of his life really quite miserable. That is a lifestyle. Now, that guy, you could maybe look like him. And after a while, I'm like, so you could look like me. He still goes out a couple of times, doesn't always eat the right food, but I do a bit of exercise, and I'm not always eating terrible food. So after a while, people are like, you are the more realistic, if what's somewhat less impressive, goes to fitness. So that's how I started off, and it was fun. I enjoyed it. But London, like I say, was expensive, and I wanted to get overseas again. I had the bug and wanted to do something interesting. My dad had moved to Spain, the south of Spain, and for any Brits listening in, anyone European, it's Marbella. Which has a reputation, quite rightly so, for being the party capital of Europe. So I moved over there to be a trainer, and it was fun. I had bleached blonde hair. I had my own column in the fitness magazine. But if I'm being honest, I probably did more partying than I did training, and I had a great time.
Okay, that's quite a story, and I'm really curious to see all those failed acting attempt videos.
Unfortunately, old enough that a lot of these things aren't really online, although my mom did record some of these things, and there's
Oh,
definitely a few out there you can find. I'm infinitely bribable to show you them.
all right, this is great. So, transitioning from personal training to talent acquisition. So, what specifically attracted you to talent acquisition as a profession?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, and no disrespect to any recruiters out there, I've never met anyone ever that wanted to be a recruiter when they were growing up. It's something that you fall into. And I moved back to the UK and I was essentially trying to impress a woman and get a job. And I thought I would do something in sales. I thought I knew what was going to make money as a personal trainer. I thought maybe I'd sell fitness equipment or something along those lines. So I went to meet a recruiter and I said, I want to sell fitness equipment. He goes, what about IT recruitment? And I said, I don't know what that is. He's like, I want to introduce you to a guy who's a partner in what is now very successful headhunting firm in the UK out of Birmingham. And I had an interview. Didn't really know what the job was, but I was like, okay, I'm kind of competitive. Then get a phone call back the next day. And they're like, we want you to meet the other partner. Lovely guy, massive respect for him. Quite aggressive, sort of fits the criteria of kind of the UK British recruiter leader back in the day. And basically ripped apart my resume and said it's I won't use the language that he used, but it's quite a direct, really no experience whatsoever, and have basically lived a life of fun. Now, the competitive guy in me was like, oh, hang on a minute here, I can prove you wrong. And actually, I've learned a lot about people in there. I reckon they'll be all right at this.
Mm-hmm.
So I leave, and apparently the guy liked that. And I honestly figure as well, I was going in such a low entry, low pay job, and they were like, they could have sort of taken a chance. 1 week on getting people to do push-ups and side jumps, and then I'm an IT recruiter. And walking into an office environment for the first time, having to wear like a shirt and track, I was like, this is weird. And I had no idea what I was doing. And it was quite the learning curve from, go from that to there. I realized quite quickly there's a competitive element. You go write your sale on the wall, and the ones that sold that week were kings or queens, and the ones that were, you're lower than a snake's belly. So I want the commission checks, I want all of this. But I had to start from the bottom. And I knew nothing. I knew nothing. And I was just calling people that worked for what I now realize are very, very famous technology companies and just asking them what they did. And they're like, well, surely you know what Cisco does or Nortel does. And I'm like, no, nothing. Tell me. So I had to go and learn all of that. But it was interesting because I figured I saw what everyone else was doing. I saw some of these guys and I thought, you know what? They're not much smarter than me. They've just been here long. They work hard. I can do this.
Yeah.
And the competitive nature of it was interesting. The feeling of getting a deal, the feeling of closing somebody, loved it. Hooked me. I was like, this is brilliant. And that's why I kind of stuck around, because the turnover rate in recruitment is so high. It's a low barrier to entry job back then. If it doesn't work out, I mean, the shortest I saw was somebody that left within an afternoon. There was another lady that was working for a bit, and then one lunchtime she just didn't come back. And there was a lot of that. And, you'd hear just people crying at their desks because it wasn't for everyone. And it's quite that challenging environment. Right? I enjoyed the survival nature of it as well. It's like some form of reality TV show where I could outlast the rest.
Yeah. So you would draw parallels with your training in the fitness and training, personal training, and that adrenaline rush, closing the deal, and I'm competitive and I can get these things done.
Yeah, exactly. We'd have these Achievers Club lunches like once every month, and you'd go out to these amazing restaurants and drink the best wine. And the rest of us are sat there with like a ham sandwich, it was general horrible food, looking at them enviously. And I'm like, I don't want to feel like this again. I don't want to be the ham sandwich guy. I want to be going out there eating the fillet steak. So that was motivating for me.
Okay, so 2 things I've learned, that recruitment is an accidental career for most people. Secondly, that it's a very salesy, it's a very like closing the deals, like a very ambitious kind of, which I had an idea, but now that you're explaining a little bit, I think it's more than what I used to think in my head it is.
On the agency side, yes. If you think about it, you own nothing, right? You own an idea. You go to a company
Yeah.
and you're like, I'm going to hire the best people. How do they know that you are versus the other agency or the other agency?
Yeah.
So it's you're going, you have to sell yourself to get the deal. And then you go and start the recruiting process, right? So you need them to say, okay, we will sign terms with you.
So according to you, what traits of yours played an instrumental role in your success? I mean, you had a great run. I mean, now I'm assuming you're not directly into recruiting by yourself. You manage a team, but what traits of yours you think played a role?
Well, it's very different. So the role that I do now on the dark side is very, very different than one I did on the agency side. More different than I realised. But there's definitely some elements that you bring over. I think you need to be curious about people, right? Because you need to know what makes them tick as a human being. That's something I find very interesting. And, the more you know a person, the more you know where they can be better fit or what their triggers are. So that was something I enjoyed. And just curiosity about learning about the organization that you're hiring for. The best recruiters have a really good understanding of the company they're hiring for. So they would know not just what the tech does, but what it's like to actually work there, what the culture's like. So the curious mind is big. And then you need to be prepared. And obviously, this just be able to network, right? Network has always been a thing.
Yeah.
So the ability just to be able to go and network and just pick up the phones. I think these days people rely so much just on emails and message. It's the pick up the phone, ask the question, network. You need that. I don't think that's gone away because people, it's important they like you and that they trust you, right?
Yeah. Well, I like what you said that, it's a curious mind who has the potential or capability to connect the dots and see a larger picture. Okay, so now time for little reflections. Any standout moments or challenges from your career journey that you would like to share, and what lesson you learned?
Was a couple, obviously moving from the UK to Singapore. It's very different. Like the UK is a very mature, very aggressive market. And I came to Singapore and just started off doing exactly the same thing with very little direction. And I kind of learned as I went along. And I realized, I think, probably week 2, week 3, that whereas in the UK, for example, or Germany, you're very, very direct to the point of almost rude. If you do that in a market like Singapore, the person will never talk to you again. And I remember my boss at the time called me in and she's like, I've been watching you now for a couple of weeks. And it's like, do you think you've learned? And I was like, I may need to tone down my communication style or something and be a bit less intense. So that was the first note. I mean, Asia Pacific is it's so many different countries, right? And all of them are wildly different culturally, language. So learning that was massive, right? Huge. We eventually figured it out. I started to be better. But then the other big one was going from agency recruitment to internal recruitment, which used to be known as the dark side. And back when I was in the agency side, there was a bit of the agency pay people didn't like the internal people. Internal people were almost back then seen as failed recruiters, right? And it was almost like a derogatory type thing being internal.
Okay.
But then more and more companies started to hire a really good internal TA, right? So all of a sudden, they didn't need my services anymore because they hired a good internal TA. And then some things happened in terms of the company I worked for. We got bought out. My role was I didn't like the direction it was going in. And there was one very specific company, this cybersecurity company, that I always wanted to recruit for, but like, we never need you. We've got it covered. And I'd always really liked this company. And then I get a phone call one day about moving over there to the dark side. And I'm like, okay, this is the direction it's going in for TA. And thought, if you can't beat them, join them. So I joined the Palo Alto Networks. Started my internal journey from there, which was vastly different. And you realize that you're no longer there's a sales element to the role for sure. But the HR piece, how everything works together, that was a big learning curve for me.
Right. So I believe now you're going to be in the dark side.
Well, I've been in the dark side now for over 9 years at Palo Alto Networks, and now just a year and a bit of service. Hey, I love the dark side. It's not so dark over here. I'm never going back.
Okay, and since interestingly you spoke about the communication style and how is it different for UK, and when you moved to APAC, you had to adopt a completely different style. And which brings me to the question that do you believe that people's attitude and expectations towards work and environment differ across the regions? Or have you noticed any significant cultural variations in candidate preferences?
Yeah, I mean, look, the biggest variance for me in region is India and Japan. Like they are diametrically opposed and both very challenging, but very rewarding in their own ways. You know, India, just the sheer volume of people, the market's so dynamic over there, you know, how it works from a hiring perspective and just how competitive it is and people are willing to move and negotiations and all of this. It's super interesting. And a lot of my work the last few years has been India. I love it. I'm over there all the time. It's super exciting for me, but very, very different in terms of the way they look at it versus a market like Japan, which is still, you know, relatively new, the concept of moving jobs. It wasn't that long ago where people would have a job for
Yeah.
life, right? So sort of people moving, it's not like it's such an easy decision as it would be, you know, in other parts of the world. So, for example, in Japan, the candidates generally prefer talking to people from agencies. They like to be represented. They like the middleman, but they don't necessarily go directly to somebody like me. And there are some cultural things, and I have never perfected it, but I've learned a lot of things what not to do. But that's very interesting. You really have to think differently when recruiting in both markets.
Okay, that's very interesting. I mean, specifically, I want to ask you, like, the Japan, even for the younger generation, this changing of jobs and being represented by the recruiter, like the agency, is still a thing.
Still a thing. So, I mean, agencies, I would say, and I know a lot of other agency listeners you listen to this, but Japan, they have an amazing time. They charge a really high fee and they make a lot of money because people prefer to go through them, and that's how it works over there. And it's people maybe take slightly longer to kind of make a decision on a move as well. Like, you know, the family all needs to be brought into it as well. So, and you need to understand that things do work differently. Like what would maybe work in the US, for example, you absolutely can't have the same expectations over there. Japan really has some uniqueness about it. Super exciting market, but one that is very, very different. And I always say to my team, if you've recruited in India, you've recruited in Japan,
you can
recruit anywhere.
Okay. It's like driving. If you can drive in India, you can drive anywhere in the world.
Yeah, I would agree with that. If you can drive in India, be very, very relaxed about it. I totally agree. Yeah.
Okay. To break the rhythm, I have 3 statements, and I want you to say whether it's a truth or it's a myth. I just gathered it from the internet. Recruiters spend an average of 6 seconds reviewing your resume.
7 seconds, unless maybe it's gone down by a second. Yeah, I mean, look, it's an interesting one, and I've done some courses when it's like it's important the layout of your CV as well. Obviously, this is more when you're reviewing loads and loads of applications, right? And you only have a short amount of time. But yeah, generally, you want to get. I think it's either the top left-hand corner. You want to get as much information there as possible. But it does make a difference, right? If you want to get 6. I think it's 7 seconds. It may have gone down to 6. Whether that means recruiters have got more efficient, I don't know. Okay,
in 1 second, I gather top left corner, please.
I think it's like, so it's there's certain position, but definitely is like we will look at that and go, okay, it's hard. So you see, you definitely need to stand out and you need to put some thought into it.
Great. 7% of recruiters use LinkedIn to find talents and vet candidates.
Only 87. Yeah, I mean, for sure. It's once again the only market that maybe do it would be Japan, where LinkedIn is just not commonly used. I mean, it's still used, but to nowhere near the degree of other countries. But yeah, I mean, look, we get very comfortable on LinkedIn. Like we really do. It's I would say most of us use it for pretty much everything. Even if it's just somebody sends a resume, you're cross-checking their LinkedIn profile, it's like their profile. But yeah, I mean, LinkedIn's making things very easy for us over the years. Let's be honest.
Okay. And my third and last statement is that do recruiters use search engines to look up information on applicants?
Well, yeah. So it's interesting. I think there's a lot of checks that go into hiring. There's obviously there's the more traditional ones of references, and then you go through, obviously after an offer's made, there's all of the legal stuff you have to go through as well, and the criminal things. But for sure, and everyone has opinions. The problem is it's finding the people with the right opinions, because, for example, you may have, if he has 10 people, 9 of them may think you're the most wonderful human being in the world. That 10th person may say something completely different, and it might be wildly inaccurate. So you have to figure out, okay, who do you trust? So you have to know to listen to the right voices. But yeah, absolutely, we check on people, do our due diligence, and make sure we're hiring somebody that's going to fundamentally be a decent person.
But
more than anything else.
I think it's still an instinct game also at the end of the day, like a teeny tiny instinct that you get about the person that, okay, yeah, maybe.
Well, so here's the thing. We try to move away from that, like the gut feeling things. We like to interview people. There's all this cognitive, unconscious bias and all of these things as well. The gut feeling thing, it's, some people swear by it. But I don't think that does well for diversity. I think, we should be actually properly interviewing people and questioning them and measuring people in the right way.
Right.
The gut feeling thing, sometimes it comes down to the fact that you connect with them and like them as a person, maybe say a sports team issue. That wasn't necessarily the best candidate for the role, right?
True.
And we have to, and it's difficult for all of us. We've all got biases to actually go, no, okay, that's the gut feeling. I'm not saying ignore it.
Yeah.
But let's still test it and interview, right? And if that backs up our gut feeling, then let's action it. And I think we need to be a bit more scientific on it.
Yeah, that's the most point. Fair enough. Right. So my next question is more on the advice side. So for those who are thinking about a career shift into talent acquisition, although disclaimer, you did say it's an accidental career, but let's say after getting inspired by you, somebody wants to move into this line, what practical steps they can take to build necessary skills that are required?
I mean, first and foremost, I think if you move in any job, in anything, it's literally the old-fashioned way of just speaking to somebody, just asking, finding out a recruiter, whether it's internal or on the agency side. I do think starting off on the agency side, giving that a go, you learn a lot of the skills, right? You really, I think it's a good ground. Like most of the best internal TA that I've worked with have an agency as well before they've gone, because they learn how to sell and a lot of the good things. There are huge opportunities, but I would say figure out what industry that you want to go into, because obviously there's recruitment. I'm a tech recruiter. There's so many different types of recruitment. So find an industry that you're passionate about. And it doesn't need to be tech. It doesn't even banking. One of my very best friends, he runs a very successful sort of renewable energy type company.
Okay.
Very interesting space. They're doing very well. So it could be something like that. The smart advice would be obviously look for where the market's going. I think obviously AI is something that's mentioned, like, but look what's going to be there for the next few years and try and ride the wave of that.
The sunrise industries.
Exactly, right. And that's where you have to get ahead of the curve a little bit, because in recruiting, you need to be in a vibrant market where there's lots of activity, lots of hiring going on. If the market's going that way and no one's interested, lo and behold, there's going to be no recruitment. And unfortunately, when there's no recruitment, the people most affected by it are the recruiters, because they're not needed anymore. So it's just figuring out what sort of thing you want to be recruiting for, what is the industry that you think you're interested in, and it's going to be going in the right direction.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Now, this question will help a lot of audience here. So, drawing your experience, what are the 3 things a candidate can do to stand out during the hiring process, especially if you can speak from the tech industry point of view?
Look, I think I'm old and also old-fashioned in certain ways. Let's put it out. And I do think there's some of the things that used to be done are a smart way of doing things. So first of all, your resume needs to look good. But the reality is, obviously applying for a job is an effective way of doing things. But sometimes your resume can be lost in a sea of people. So sometimes just a hey message you on LinkedIn things, say, hey, I see a hiring this job. You're more likely, because just first of all, it shows a bit of initiative. You sort of track down the person, and maybe with the hiring manager as well. I'm not saying it always works, but it shows a little bit of initiative. You're trying to stand out from the crowd a little bit as well.
Right.
That's the big one in terms of getting noticed.
Right.
Do your research on the company. There's nothing worse when clearly people have applied to lots of different companies and you call them, you're like, well, what do you like about us? And you can tell they're Googling it, right? Now, I'm not expecting you to know the ins and outs of all the product and all of these things, but actually, like, okay, have a fundamental understanding of what we do and be able to talk, even just some sound bites, about some relevant stuff. Because if you've not taken the time to do any research on this at all, that's the red flag, right? And so preparation is really key. And then if you do get to the interview stage, a couple of things that are just key. Make sure you ask questions, right? Relevant questions, because hiring now is different, right? Especially what I do. It's more headhunting than anything else. Right? Most of the people we hire are very successful where they are, and we're trying to tell them to come over us to be there for their life. So it's not just you come in and impress me. It's both ways, right? It needs to be a fit. It's like dating. Like it really is in a way. Like it needs to work with both parties. There needs to be that connection, and everything needs to be aligned because you want people to come in and have like a long-term relationship, long-term career with you. So ask questions because that's what it shows that you're interested, and you want to walk out there feeling comfortable as well. Now, there's questions in there's questions. So don't be like, what's my lunch break or what's in the canteen or something like that. Or, general kind of questions around the culture and things like this, I think are really relevant questions to ask. Or, it's that's bit. And then the final one, so few people do this these days, this is a dying bomb, is if you have met somebody, the power of when somebody just sends a follow-up email that says, hey, thanks for your time, I appreciate it, reiterating, it's such a small thing.
Yeah.
But when people do it, I really like it. It's an old school thing. It's a respect thing. It's like, do you know what? You've taken the time to do that. Maybe that's just me. Maybe it's just a generation thing, but I like that.
Okay. So just to summarize, you said the initiative. So be proactive, do your research on the company, ask the right questions, and a thank you note never hurts, even in this day and time. Right?
It never hurts. Yeah. It's courteous. It's just a nice way of doing it. And to me, I like that.
Absolutely. Okay. So you mentioned to me that now you're practically living on LinkedIn. And you also admitted a while ago that 87% of recruiters look into LinkedIn. So any tips for broader audience on how they can spruce up their LinkedIn profile to get noticed, or any general things job seekers can do to get attention from the recruitment specialist?
There's two different elements to that, right? So there's the getting noticed on LinkedIn versus the actual looking for a job. I mean, the one thing is be authentic, right? So I probably should post a little bit more. When I do post, I try and balance it out between, hey, here's a new product that we've launched. Brilliant. Look at our Q2 results. That's one thing, but like for your own personal profile, it's be authentic. Talk about an experience. Like if I'm thinking about post, I want people to envisage like what it's like to work in my company. Yeah, you can see the share price. Yeah, you can see the new tech, but what's it going to be like when you walk in the door? Who have you been working with? Like, I try and make it so authentic like that. And I think that means something to me as opposed to just pushing out content, right? Which we all do.
Especially in the age of ChatGPT.
And the age of ChatGPT, it's like, what about you as a person, right? Now, in terms of looking for a job, it's SPI, for the most part, is a jobs board, right? There's other things on there as well. But it always makes me laugh when somebody has updated their LinkedIn photo or something, or put a bit on there. It's kind of like the unofficial way of saying,
it's
so it's a sign, right? And you do it, and it's like, I always joke, and I'm like, oh, new picture, you interviewing. So, yeah, just be conscious and then just make it. And it's the same advice for CVs as well, which I see. Tell the story about you, what you do. There's lots of people that list what their company does, right? We can Google that, but what do you do? Right? What's your role? What impact have you made, right? Like, who are you as a person? What value can you add to us? That's the thing. So think more about that and try and make it unique. Yeah, we all represent our companies on there as well for the most part, but just think about like who you are as a person and then what you can bring as opposed to just going like, here's the 10 amazing things about this current company. And it goes back to the authenticity thing as well. I think that there's some good things to do.
Okay, that's cool. We are almost towards the end, Adam. Since we are talking about talent acquisition and you are one of the thought leaders in that space, I want to understand that where do you see this whole field headed towards in the next few years? How do you see the landscape evolving?
It's a very interesting conversation, and I was actually at a leadership meeting a couple of weeks ago talking about this. I mean, look, we can't ignore AI, right? And I think AI, you either run from it and then you become redundant, or you embrace it. And I think TA has huge opportunities to embrace it. It could be reviewing all of the applications and sort of actually giving you like, well, these are maybe the top 50 that you could call. So there's AI. There's a lot of room for AI to kind of improve many aspects of it. And we talk a lot about skills these days as well. I think, that skills-based hiring where maybe your resume won't have all the ideal companies to have worked for all the bullet points, but from a skills perspective that we could actually analyze and go, okay, Asta may have not done these things, but she has X amount of experience in other areas which could lend itself to that. So it's about the skills, because at the moment, I think a lot of hiring is really, especially in tech, you've worked for company A that we compete against, doing this role in company A. We could hire you and plug and play you to do this theoretically. Whereas the skills thing, it's a broader mindset needed, because the resume is not going to be as obvious to the hiring manager or even the recruiter. But it's like, hey, if we think about this, these transferable skills here, what this person has done, maybe if we bring them in, give them the right training, and a lot of companies these days are very big on how could we theoretically take people with almost next to no experience in this and get them trained, right? And then if they've got the right attributes, we can get them trained to be successful. So I think that's going to be something that's going to be looked at in the non too distant future as well. But it's going to be a heavy lift and a mindset change for a lot of people, especially in the more traditional countries that would still look at it like, you didn't go use this university or this. But I think that's in the future. So embracing AI, and there's ongoing conversations. I mean, my personal company right now is sort of AI company. And then just the skills piece as well. I think that's the direction that it's going to go.
So I believe that sometimes you do struggle with hiring managers on that perspective. I believe that you will say one thing and they are very, boxed mindset. Do you have those kind of incidences?
All the time. And, and I am sure, hiring for my own team, I've been that hiring manager as well. I'm sure, hey, they've not worked for one of these companies and done this. It goes back to dating, right? If you tell the hiring manager what they're looking at, they want perfect this, all of the things, the most amazing person. So, what if we couldn't get you that? What if we, and then you end up compromise. So you have to have an open mind. And it's a constant battle. And there's some early adopters that are more open to this. There's other more traditional people. They may never change, right? Because it's worked for them. So it's not going to happen overnight, for sure. So in many ways, it makes our job as TA harder. Because, at the moment, there's an element, well, you work for one of these 5 companies here, there's a high chance you'll be able to fit well enough. But the industry will end up evolving, you will end up changing, and I hope to be at the forefront of that and still relevant to work and not having been replaced by a robot in the next few years is my goal.
Right. Well, this was great, Adam. I love this conversation, and there were tons of advice and tons of information packed here. And I love one last thing. Where can people find you? I think it's on your LinkedIn or any.
I'm on LinkedIn all the time. I mean, the word thought leader, I have a bit of an issue. I want to say I'm a thought leader, but I'm a.
Quite popular on LinkedIn. I had to look up for you, and you have quite a huge fan following. So
I wouldn't say it's a fan following. I'd say it's probably people that want to work for the companies that I work for. I don't think it's anything to do with me. I think it's the fact that I've been lucky enough to work for, in my mind, 2 of the preeminent technology companies, unbelievable companies. And in the role that I do, I think it's correlated between me being popular on LinkedIn. I don't think it's me personally. I think it's the companies that I've worked for, and I'm okay with that.
So thank you very much. I enjoyed this conversation with Adam, who shared some tips for those in talent acquisition, as well as some general tips for job seekers who are aiming to stand out. From some industry-specific advice to universal strategies, there's something for everybody. Do share your takeaways with me in our discussion in the comments below.